Get out, Daniel's voice thundered through the house, sharp and cold enough to make Emily flinch. Her hand instinctively went to her swollen belly, protective, as if shielding the life inside from his cruelty. "Daniel, please," she whispered, her voice trembling. "I'm carrying your child. Don't do this, not now." His jaw tightened, eyes flashing with disgust. "A child that will chain me down? You're nothing but a burden, Emily. I don't need a wife who slows me down. I need freedom. I need success." Tears welled in Emily's eyes. This was the man she had married for love, the man who once swore to protect her. Now he looked at her like a stranger. "I have nowhere to go," she pleaded. "At least wait until the baby." He cut her off with a sharp laugh. Pulling out his wallet, he yanked a single $20 bill, crumpled it, and tossed it at her feet. "There, that should be enough for someone like you. Take it and get out of my house." The words pierced deeper than any knife. Emily's legs felt weak as she bent down, fingers brushing over the damp paper. The baby kicked lightly inside her, as if sensing her despair. She clutched the bill in one hand, her belly in the other, while Daniel stood in the doorway with arms folded, cold and unyielding. The night air was icy when she stepped outside. Rain began to fall, plastering her hair to her face, mixing with the tears streaming down her cheeks. She turned once, hoping, just hoping, he would stop her. But the door slammed shut. Alone, abandoned, and with only $20 to her name, Emily whispered to her unborn child, "I don't know how, but I promise I'll fight for us." The rain didn't stop that night. Emily clutched her thin sweater around her shoulders as she shuffled down the empty street, the streetlights flickering against puddles that mirrored her hollow eyes. The crumpled backslash $20 felt like a cruel joke in her fist, mocking her, reminding her of the man who had once sworn to cherish her, but had now discarded her like nothing. Her belly was heavy, each step aching, but she kept moving because standing still meant collapsing, and collapsing meant giving up. And she couldn't give up. Not now. She found a bus stop and sank onto the bench, the cold seeping into her bones. Her hands trembled as she unfolded the bill, staring at it as though it might magically multiply. $20. That's what our love, our vows, my years with him were worth to him. Her chest tightened, tears spilling despite her efforts to hold them back. A wave of nausea rose, but she breathed through it, pressing her palm against her belly. The baby stirred gently, as if reminding her that she wasn't truly alone. "Don't worry, sweetheart," she whispered through chattering teeth. "Mama will find a way." As the night dragged on, Emily's thoughts betrayed her, dragging her backward into memories she wished she could erase. She remembered the first time she met Daniel. He was charming then, handsome, ambitious, with that disarming smile that made her believe she was safe in his arms. He brought her flowers, pulled out chairs for her, whispered promises about a future filled with love and family. But the man who courted her was not the man who threw her out tonight. Slowly, after the wedding, ambition replaced affection. He spent more nights out working, and more mornings criticizing her cooking, her clothes, even her body. When she told him about the pregnancy instead of joy, his eyes had narrowed with calculation. "A baby will slow me down," he had muttered. "I have too much at stake to babysit you." Still, Emily had held on to hope. She told herself stress made him harsh, that success would soften him again. But tonight proved hope was a dangerous lie. By dawn, her body ached from sitting upright all night, damp and shivering. A kind stranger at a convenience store handed her a steaming paper cup of tea when he saw her struggling to stand. She thanked him softly, holding back tears of gratitude for even the smallest kindness. The $20 bought her a cheap sandwich, a bottle of water, and a bus ride across town. She didn't know where she was going, only that she couldn't stay where people might recognize her. Every part of her wanted to collapse, to scream, to demand why fate had abandoned her. But then she felt the steady thump of life within her, and strength she didn't know she had flickered to life. "This isn't the end," she murmured, her hand firm on her belly. It's the beginning. Somehow I'll make sure you never feel the pain I feel tonight." As she stepped off the bus in a part of town she had never seen before, the sun broke faintly through gray clouds. Her shoes were soaked, her clothes clung to her skin, but inside her chest, a fragile ember of determination burned. Emily Carter had been left with nothing. No husband, no home, no family to turn to. Only $20 and the tiny heartbeat inside her. And though she didn't know it yet, that night on the wet streets marked the beginning of a journey that would transform her into someone Daniel Hayes would one day beg to recognize. The first week was the hardest. Emily found herself drifting from one cheap motel lobby to another, pretending to wait for someone, just to escape the bitter cold. But without money, those small shelters were temporary, and soon the managers would notice and push her back into the streets. Her belly grew heavier each day, her body aching under the strain of pregnancy without proper rest or food. Her shoes wore thin, and her once neat hair now clung in tangled strands around her face. One night, after being turned away from yet another place, she stumbled into the doorway of a women's shelter. The building was old, its bricks worn, but inside it smelled faintly of soup and warm bread. A volunteer at the desk looked up, her face kind but weary. "Honey, you okay?" Emily swallowed hard, ashamed to speak. She wanted to say she was fine, but the truth pressed against her chest like a stone. I just need a place for the night," she whispered. The woman nodded, guiding her in gently. "You're safe here." That night, Emily lay on a thin cot among other women, some whispering to themselves, some clutching children, others staring blankly at the ceiling. She realized she wasn't alone in her suffering, yet instead of comfort, the thought deepened her sorrow. How had her life come to this? Just months ago, she was in a warm home with a husband she believed loved her. Now she was nobody. As tears slid down her cheeks, a soft voice spoke from the cot beside her. "First night here." Emily turned her head. An older woman with silver-streaked hair and wise eyes was watching her. She wore a faded shawl, her hands folded neatly in her lap. "Yes," Emily admitted softly. I don't know what to do anymore." The woman gave her a gentle smile. "Name S. Grace, and trust me, I know that feeling." Over the next days, Grace took Emily under her wing. She shared little comforts, a blanket, advice on finding help, stories of her own struggles. Grace had once been wealthy but lost everything after her husband's death and a ruthless legal battle. "Money comes and goes," Grace told her one evening over a bowl of soup. "But strength, that's something no one can take from you." Emily listened, clinging to every word. For the first time since that terrible night, someone spoke to her not with pity but with respect, as though she still had worth. Weeks later, labor pains gripped Emily in the middle of the night. Fear surged. She had no husband, no family, no one except Grace, who rushed to her side. "It's going to be all right," Grace whispered, holding her hand tightly as the shelter staff hurried her into a small van that rattled toward the hospital. Hours later, Emily cradled her newborn son in trembling arms. His tiny fingers wrapped instinctively around hers, his soft cries filling the sterile hospital room. Tears streamed down her cheeks, not just of sorrow, but of awe. She named him Ethan, meaning strong, because she wanted him to grow up never doubting his own strength. Grace, standing by the bed, smiled warmly. "He's your new beginning, Emily. You'll see. Life isn't over, it's just changing." Emily kissed her son's forehead, her heart swelling with a fierce promise. No matter what it took, no matter how many nights she had to sleep hungry, how many doors slammed in her face, she would fight. For him, for them both. The woman who had been thrown out with $20 had nothing left to lose. But as she gazed into her son's wide, innocent eyes, she realized she now had everything to fight for. And that was enough. The weeks after Ethan's birth were the most exhausting of Emily's life. Nights blurred into days as she soothed his cries, rocked him to sleep, and nursed him in the dim corners of the shelter. Yet, despite the fatigue, every glance at his tiny face reminded her why she had to keep going. One afternoon, while she sat feeding Ethan, Grace appeared with 2 steaming cups of tea. She placed one in front of Emily, then leaned closer. "You're strong, but you need more than strength," Grace said gently. "You need a plan." Emily gave a tired smile. "A plan? Grace, I can't even afford bus fare." Grace chuckled softly. "That's exactly why you need one. You can't live like this forever, and neither can that boy." She gestured toward Ethan, who had drifted off to sleep against Emily's chest. "What do you mean?" Emily asked. Grace grew thoughtful. "Before my life fell apart, I worked in real estate. Houses, apartments, commercial properties, you name it. I learned one thing: people will always need a place to live. If you're smart, if you pay attention, you can turn nothing into something." Emily frowned. "Real estate? Grace, I have no money, no connections. I don't even know where to start." "You don't need money to learn," Grace said firmly. "You just need determination. I'll teach you what I know." That evening, after Ethan was asleep, Grace began sketching simple lessons on a scrap of paper, terms like mortgage, equity, foreclosure. To Emily, it was a foreign language, but she soaked it in, hungry for something more than mere survival. "Foreclosed homes," Grace explained one night, "are properties the bank repossesses when people can't pay. They're often sold cheap, sometimes just to cover the bank's losses. If you can spot one, find a buyer, connect the dots, you earn commission without ever owning the property." Emily's eyes widened. "You mean I can make money without investing first?" Grace nodded. "Exactly. You act as the bridge, and in a world full of broken things, bridges are valuable." Emily began spending afternoons at the local library, Ethan strapped snugly in a sling against her chest. While he slept, she devoured real estate guides, newspapers, and foreclosure listings. She scribbled notes furiously, her mind coming alive in ways it hadn't in months. Her first chance came unexpectedly. At the shelter, one of the volunteers, a middle-aged man named Carl, complained about his cousin's house. "She's desperate to sell. It's been sitting on the market for months. If someone could find her a buyer, she'd practically give it away." Emily's ears perked up. "Do you think she'd let me help?" she asked carefully. Carl shrugged. "Can't hurt to ask, she just wants it off her hands." Emily contacted the cousin the next day, her voice shaking as she introduced herself. To her surprise, the woman agreed. With Grace's help, Emily wrote a simple flyer and pinned it to boards in grocery stores and coffee shops. She even stood outside the property on weekends, greeting curious passers-by with Ethan's stroller beside her. Most people ignored her, but one couple, a young teacher and his wife, stopped. They loved the house, but the price was too high. Emily, remembering Grace's lessons, negotiated with the seller. After tense phone calls and late-night planning, the deal went through. When Emily received her first modest commission, a crisp envelope filled with real cash, her hands trembled. It wasn't much, but it was hers. She had earned it through grit, not charity. Grace hugged her tightly. "See, you're not broken, Emily, you're just beginning." Emily clutched Ethan close, tears welling in her eyes. For the first time since being cast out into the cold with only $20, she felt the faint spark of possibility. It was just one deal, one step. But Emily knew deep down it was the first brick in the foundation of something much greater. One day, she would no longer be the woman thrown out like trash. She would be the woman people begged to meet. And Daniel, her ruthless ex-husband, would see it. Emily's first commission was modest, barely enough to cover Ethan's baby supplies and a few weeks of groceries. But to her, it felt like winning the lottery. It wasn't about the money, it was about proof. Proof that she could make a way where none seemed possible. Grace saw it too. "That first step is always the hardest," she reminded Emily one morning over breakfast at the shelter. "Now you keep going, momentum is your friend." Emily nodded, determination in her eyes. She was no longer just surviving, she was building. Word of her small success began to trickle out. Carl, the shelter volunteer who had introduced her to his cousin, told others about Emily's persistence. Soon, another opportunity knocked. A retired couple wanted to downsize but struggled to find serious buyers. Emily jumped at the chance. This time, she was better prepared. She dressed in the best outfit she could afford from a thrift store, styled her hair neatly, and carried herself with quiet confidence. She toured the property with Ethan on her hip, snapping pictures with an old phone. At night, while Ethan slept, Emily posted ads online, crafted descriptions, and followed up with every call. It was exhausting, feeding a newborn, running to bus stops, juggling phone calls, but she refused to give up. Finally, after weeks of effort, she found a buyer, a small business owner looking to invest. Negotiations dragged on, but Emily held firm, remembering Grace's advice. Don't sell yourself short. People respect confidence. When the deal closed, her commission was nearly triple her first. Emily held the check in her hand, tears streaming down her cheeks. With her earnings, she and Ethan moved out of the shelter into a tiny one-bedroom apartment. It wasn't much. The walls were thin and the plumbing creaked, but it was theirs. No curfews, no lines for food, no whispered pity from strangers. Grace visited often, proud like a mother. "I told you, Emily," she said, rocking Ethan in her arms. "You were never meant to be small." Still, Emily faced challenges. The real estate world was ruthless. Agents scoffed at her in second-hand clothes. Clients doubted her youth and lack of experience. Some deals slipped through her fingers at the last moment, leaving her devastated. One particularly harsh day, after losing a big sale, Emily sat on the floor with Ethan, clutching him close. "Maybe I can't do this," she whispered, her voice cracking. Ethan, too young to understand, simply smiled at her, his tiny hand brushing her cheek. That simple touch rekindled her resolve. "No," she said firmly, "I will not let us go back." Her breakthrough came when she stumbled upon a foreclosed building listed at a shockingly low price. Where others saw a crumbling liability, Emily saw potential. She pitched the property to a young investor she had met at the library, carefully laying out how the building could be renovated and rented for profit. The investor hesitated. "You sound convincing," he admitted, "but why should I trust you?" Emily looked him in the eye. "Because I've lost everything, and when you've lost everything, you learn how to see value where others don't. I see value in that building, and I see value in you trusting me." Her words landed. The investor agreed. The deal not only earned Emily her biggest commission yet, but also established her reputation as someone who could spot hidden opportunities. From there, her momentum grew. She upgraded her wardrobe, invested in business cards, and started attending community events to network. People began recognizing her name. What once was mockery, the single mother with a baby strapped to her back, turned into admiration. Emily's rise was steady, but she never forgot where she came from. She visited the shelter often, donating food and offering guidance to women who reminded her of her past self. One evening, after tucking Ethan into his crib, Emily stood by the window of her apartment, gazing at the city lights. She whispered, "This is just the beginning." But deep down, she also knew. Success would eventually put her face to face with the man who had left her broken. And when that day came, she would be ready. The city skyline shimmered like a promise whenever Emily looked up. By now, she had closed enough mid-sized deals to live comfortably, but her heart was restless. The little one-bedroom apartment had served its purpose, yet Emily dreamed of something more for herself, for Ethan, and for the future she wanted to build. Grace sensed it too. One evening over tea in Emily's kitchen, she asked, "So what's next? You've climbed the ladder this far. Are you ready for the high-rise level?" Emily smiled faintly. "You mean million-dollar properties?" Grace leaned forward. That's where the real game begins. The risks are higher, but so are the rewards. And Emily, people underestimate you because of your past. That's your weapon. Use it. The opportunity came sooner than she expected. A fellow agent, overwhelmed with listings, whispered about a penthouse suite sitting unsold for months. "It's too much work," the woman complained. "High maintenance fees, bad market timing, no one's going to bite." But Emily saw more than an overpriced listing. She saw potential. With its sweeping glass walls and rooftop garden, the penthouse was a jewel waiting for the right buyer. Emily pitched herself boldly to the property owner, a weary businessman eager to offload the unit. "Give me 30 days, she said, steady and unflinching. "I'll find your buyer." The man chuckled. You're not even with one of the big firms." Emily didn't blink. "All I need is a chance." Something in her conviction swayed him. He signed the agreement. From that moment, Emily poured herself into the project. She staged the penthouse with rented furniture, transforming empty rooms into spaces that whispered luxury. She hired a photographer with the little savings she had left, ensuring every angle glowed with promise. On open house day, she stood in a simple but elegant dress, Ethan at daycare, her nerves hidden beneath practiced confidence. The city's wealthy elite walked through the doors, their perfume and polished shoes filling the air. Most dismissed her politely, some smirked, but one man lingered, a quiet, sharp-eyed investor. He toured each room slowly, his expression unreadable. When he finally spoke, he asked, "Why should I buy this? Everyone says it's a bad investment." Emily met his gaze. "Because everyone else sees a burden, but you, like me, see what others can't. This isn't just a property, it's a statement. And the person who owns it will own more than space. They'll own presence." Her words struck a chord. After a week of negotiation, the deal closed. The final price, $1, $2 million. Emily received her largest commission yet, enough to move Ethan and herself into a spacious two-bedroom condo, enough to build a safety net, enough to make people notice her name. That night, Emily sat in her new home, papers spread across the table. Ethan giggled nearby, playing with his toys. For the first time, she felt like the world was truly opening its doors. Grace called to congratulate her. "You've made your first $1 million deal, Emily. Do you realize what that means?" Emily smiled through tears. "It means I'm not just surviving anymore, I'm thriving." But Grace's tone grew serious. "It also means you're stepping into a world where power plays matter, and power attracts attention, good and bad." Emily's chest tightened. She knew Grace was right. Success didn't just elevate, it also exposed. Within weeks, her phone buzzed with new opportunities. Developers wanted her advice. Investors sought her opinion. She was no longer the outsider begging for scraps. She was the woman shaping deals others envied. Yet in the back of her mind, Emily knew that her rising profile would eventually collide with Daniel's world. He thrived among the wealthy, the arrogant, the powerful, the very circles she was now entering. And though she hadn't seen him since that fateful night, he threw her out with $20 in her hand. She knew the reunion was inevitable. But this time, she would not be the broken wife begging for mercy. She would be the woman standing tall, holding the keys to empires. And when Daniel looked at her, he would realize what he had lost. Emily never thought her name would appear in the business section of the city newspaper. Yet one crisp morning, there it was. Single mother real estate agent closes penthouse deal, defying odds. The article painted her as a determined woman who had built a career from nothing, balancing motherhood and business with relentless drive. A small photo of her standing proudly in front of the sold penthouse accompanied the piece. Emily stared at the paper, stunned. She hadn't sought publicity, but the journalist had been fascinated by her story after hearing whispers at a networking event. Now, her phone buzzed with new calls, her email overflowed with inquiries, and her name circulated in circles that had once been far beyond her reach. Grace teased her gently that evening. "Careful, darling, fame is like fire. It can cook your meals or burn your house down." Emily laughed, but a quiet unease stirred in her chest. She was entering a world that thrived on gossip, competition, and reputation. Still, she couldn't turn back now. Meanwhile, across town, Daniel Kingston sat in a glossy boardroom, skimming the morning paper while waiting for a meeting to begin. At first, he barely noticed the headline, but the photograph caught his eye. He froze, his jaw tightening as recognition struck him like lightning. Emily. His Emily, though she had never truly been his. Not anymore. The woman in the photo was nothing like the tear-stained figure he had shoved out into the cold. This Emily stood tall, confident, her eyes steady, her smile poised. She radiated strength. Daniel's grip on the paper tightened. He read every word of the article, disbelief growing with each sentence. A single mother, a self-made agent, $1 million deal. She had survived. No, she had thrived. And suddenly, Daniel felt a sharp sting in his chest, one he refused to name. That evening, he sat in his penthouse suite, ironically larger but emptier than the one Emily had just sold. His current girlfriend, a glamorous socialite, chattered about an upcoming gala, but Daniel wasn't listening. His mind was elsewhere, replaying Emily's name, her face, the quiet power she now exuded. "How could she have risen so far without me?" he muttered under his breath after she left. The question gnawed at him. Daniel had always believed he was the one with power, the one in control. Seeing Emily's success shattered that illusion. For the first time in years, he felt something unfamiliar: regret. On the other side of the city, Emily carried on, unaware of the storm her success had stirred in Daniel's mind. Her days were a blur of client meetings, property tour, and late-night strategy sessions. Ethan, now a bright toddler, often toddled into the room while she worked, his laughter filling their new condo. Emily adored every sound, every smile. He was her anchor, her reason, her joy. Grace continued to mentor her, but now Emily also began mentoring others. Women from the shelter, young single mothers, people who thought they had no chance. She knew what it felt like to be overlooked, dismissed, abandoned. She vowed to become the hand that lifted others the way Grace had lifted her. But whispers about her were growing louder. At industry events, she noticed curious stares, overheard muttered comments. Some admired her resilience. Others sneered, insisting her rise was a fluke. Emily held her head high. She had no time for envy or doubt. Every deal she closed was another brick in the empire she was quietly building. Still, she couldn't ignore the strange feeling that her past was circling closer. That feeling proved right one afternoon when she received an invitation in the mail. It was for an exclusive charity gala hosted by one of the city's wealthiest developers. The kind of event where power players mingled, where reputations were cemented. Emily hesitated. Attending would put her firmly in the spotlight, but something inside her whispered that this was her next step. She didn't yet know that Daniel would be there too. And when their eyes met across that glittering ballroom, it would be the collision of past and present, the abandoned wife and the man who had thrown her away. Only this time, she wouldn't be the one on her knees. The night of the gala shimmered with wealth and excess. Luxury cars lined the entrance of the Grand Hotel, their polished chrome reflecting the golden glow of chandeliers spilling from the lobby. Inside, the ballroom gleamed with crystal glasses, marble floors, and guests dressed in couture gowns and tailored tuxedos. Emily stood at the edge of it all, her heart steady but her breath caught in her chest. She wore a sleek black gown that hugged her figure, her hair swept elegantly over one shoulder. A delicate diamond pendant glimmered at her throat, not inherited, not gifted, but bought with her own hard-earned commission. Grace had clasped her hands before she left home. "Hold your head high," she'd said. "You're not walking into their world, you're showing them it's yours too." Now Emily walked into the ballroom as though she had been born to belong. Across the room, Daniel Kingston mingled with business associates, his charm polished as ever. He laughed at the right moments, nodded at the right cues, but his thoughts were far away. When she entered, he felt it before he saw it, the subtle shift in the room's energy, the quiet hush that followed her. He turned, and there she was. Emily. For a moment, Daniel forgot how to breathe. She looked radiant, stronger than he remembered, her poise unshakable. This was not the woman he had abandoned with $20 and a newborn. This was a woman transformed. His pulse quickened. A dozen emotions battled in his chest: shock, guilt, anger, and something dangerously close to admiration. Emily's eyes swept the crowd until they locked on Daniel. Time stilled. For years, she had imagined this moment, the day she would face him again. In her mind, she had pictured herself trembling, stumbling over her words, drowning in old wounds. But now, as their gazes collided, she felt none of that. She felt power. Daniel looked older, sharper, but also emptier than she remembered. His suit was perfect, his smile charming, but his eyes carried shadows she had once mistaken for depth. Emily lifted her chin and walked past him without a word, her heels clicking against the marble floor like a drumbeat. Daniel couldn't let it go. Minutes later, he approached her as she stood near the champagne fountain, speaking with a group of investors who listened intently to her insights about market trends. When the conversation paused, he stepped closer. Emily. Her name from his lips felt strange, almost foreign. She turned slowly, her expression composed. Daniel. He searched her face for some trace of the woman he had left behind, some softness, some lingering pain he could exploit. But all he saw was calm steel. You look different, he said awkwardly. I am different, she replied evenly. Life has a way of changing people. Daniel cleared his throat, trying to reclaim the confidence that usually came so easily. I read about you in the papers. $1 million deals, your own clients. Impressive. I didn't think. He stopped himself, but the unfinished words hung heavy between them. You didn't think I would survive without you, Emily finished for him. Daniel flinched. She smiled faintly, but there was no warmth in it. You threw me out with a baby in my arms, Daniel. You gave me $20 and thought that was the end of my story. But it wasn't the end. It was the beginning. Her voice was quiet, but it cut sharper than any shout. For the first time in years, Daniel felt small. He tried to recover. Emily, I regret things. We were young. I didn't know how to handle. She stopped him with a raised hand. You don't get to rewrite history. You don't get to explain away cruelty. The investors she'd been speaking with returned just then, pulling her back into their conversation. Emily turned to them effortlessly, her smile genuine, her confidence radiant. Daniel stood frozen, watching as she moved seamlessly among the powerful, her presence commanding more respect than he had ever given her. For the first time, he realized the truth. She no longer needed him. And worse, he needed her. That night, as Emily left the gala, she felt lighter. Facing Daniel hadn't broken her, it had freed her. She had seen him for what he was, a man who once had power over her but who now had no hold at all. But she also knew something else. Daniel wouldn't let this go easily. Men like him never did. Weeks passed after the gala, but Daniel couldn't shake the image of Emily from his mind. The grace in her stride, the calm power in her voice, the way she had dismissed him without a flicker of fear. He told himself it was about unfinished business, about pride, about proving she wasn't beyond his reach. But deep down, he knew the truth. He wanted her back. Not because of love, but because she was now everything he wasn't: respected, admired, untouchable. And Daniel Kingston hated to be reminded of what he had thrown away. Emily, however, barely thought of him. Her focus was on Ethan, on her clients, on the empire she was carefully building one deal at a time. She had just closed another major property, this one worth nearly $5 million, when she bought herself and her son something she had once thought impossible, a sprawling mansion on the outskirts of the city. It wasn't just a home, it was a statement. On the day she moved in, Grace stood with her in the grand foyer, looking around at the marble floors and sweeping staircase. Tears glistened in Grace's eyes. "You've come so far, Emily, from a shelter bed to this. I hope you know how proud I am of you." Emily hugged her tightly. "I couldn't have done it without you." But Grace only shook her head. "You did this, Emily, you." Daniel heard about the mansion days later at a business dinner. One of his associates mentioned it casually. "That young agent, Emily Hayes, bought herself a $15 million estate. Can you believe it? She's unstoppable." Daniel's fork clattered against his plate. He excused himself early, the weight of jealousy pressing down harder than ever. By the next evening, he was in his car, driving up the winding road to her mansion. Emily was in the garden, watching Ethan chase bubbles across the lawn when the sound of expensive tires crunching gravel reached her ears. She turned and froze. Daniel was there, stepping out of his sleek black car, adjusting his cufflinks as though this were still his world. "Emily," he said smoothly, forcing a smile, "you look radiant." Her eyes narrowed. "What are you doing here?" "I came to talk," Daniel replied, his tone low, almost pleading. "I made mistakes, terrible ones, but people change, and maybe we could start again." Emily laughed softly, but there was no joy in it. "Start again? Daniel, you didn't just walk away from me. You threw me out like garbage, with a newborn baby in my arms." Daniel flinched. "I was foolish, selfish, but seeing you now, what you've built, Emily, we could be unstoppable together. You and I, powerhouses, think of what we could do." Emily's gaze hardened. "You still don't get it, do you? My success was never about proving myself to you. It was about surviving despite you." He stepped closer, desperation creeping into his voice. "I regret everything. Please just let me in. Give me a chance." Emily's reply was calm but firm as steel. "No, Daniel, you had your chance. You had me when I was at my most vulnerable, and you chose cruelty. There's no place for you here." She gestured at the mansion, at Ethan laughing in the distance. "Or in my life." Daniel's composure cracked. His face twisted with anger, then defeat. He opened his mouth to argue, but Emily turned her back on him and walked toward Ethan, who ran into her arms with a giggle. She didn't look back. Daniel stood there, watching as mother and son disappeared into the mansion, the heavy doors closing behind them with a final, echoing thud. It was over, truly over. Inside, Emily hugged Ethan tightly, breathing in his laughter, his warmth. Grace joined her, smiling knowingly. "You closed the deal, Emily," Grace whispered. Emily smiled, tears glistening in her eyes. "Yes, the biggest one of my life." And as the sun set over her sprawling estate, Emily knew she was no longer the abandoned wife with $20 in her hand. She was Emily Hayes, the woman who had risen from nothing, built an empire, and shut the door on her past forever.